I know it hurts, Sarah said softly, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. This was the third time in 2 months. Third time Emma had shown up after hours, claiming she'd walked into a door, fallen downstairs, slipped in the shower. But I need you to hold still while I document this. Emma's hand shot up, gripping Sarah's wrist with surprising strength. No pictures, please. Emma. Sarah set down the ice pack and met her patient's frightened gaze. I'm your doctor. These photos are for your medical file. That's all, just in case you ever need them. The younger woman's lip trembled. At 26, she should have been glowing with youth and possibility. Instead, purple bruises bloomed across her porcelain skin like poisonous flowers. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut. And Sarah had already confirmed 2 cracked ribs during the examination. He'll know, Emma whispered. Marcus always knows everything. He won't know, I promise. Sarah squeezed Emma's hand gently. But you deserve to have evidence. You deserve to have options. After a long moment, Emma nodded, and Sarah reached for her camera. What Sarah didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Marcus Hartley's paranoia ran deeper than either woman imagined. The small tracking device he'd hidden in Emma's purse would lead him straight to Dr. Mitchell's office within the hour, and what Sarah definitely didn't know was that the man who owned the building, who owned half the buildings in downtown Chicago, had been looking for a reason to visit the beautiful doctor who rented space on the 4th floor. Adrian Volkov didn't believe in coincidences. When his head of security, Nikolai, knocked on his office door at 9:30 that evening, with a tablet in hand, Adrian was reviewing acquisition contracts. He looked up with the expression that made lesser men stammer. Cold blue eyes that seemed to see through flesh and bone, angular features that belonged on a Roman statue, and the kind of controlled stillness that promised violence. Boss, you need to see this. Adrian took the tablet. The security footage showed a man, late 30s, expensive suit, the kind of soft hands that had never done real work, walking through the 4th floor hallway. Marcus Hartley. Adrian knew him by reputation. Trust fund baby, 3rd-generation money, the type who thought his last name meant he could do whatever he wanted. He's been circling Dr. Mitchell's office for 20 minutes, Nikolai continued. Building's closed. She's alone up there with a patient. Adrian was already standing, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. Get the car. You want backup? No. The word was final. Adrian had built his empire on knowing when to delegate and when to handle matters personally. Something about this situation made his instincts scream. Maybe it was the way Hartley kept checking his phone, rage evident in every jerky movement. Maybe it was because Adrian had noticed Dr. Sarah Mitchell 3 months ago, when she'd moved into the building, had found himself watching the security feeds more than he should, had memorized her schedule like a teenager with a crush. He'd built his reputation on being ruthless, on making the hard choices that kept his family's organization running smoothly. But he'd also built it on protecting what was his. And whether Sarah Mitchell knew it or not, she'd become his the moment she'd smiled at the doorman and said, please, when most people in this building issued commands. The elevator ride to the 4th floor took 37 seconds. Adrian knew because he counted them, using the time to slip into the cold, calculating mindset that had kept him alive in a world where showing weakness meant death. The hallway was empty when he emerged, silent except for the muffled sound of voices behind Dr. Mitchell's door. One voice rising, angry, male. The other trying to stay calm, professional. But Adrian could hear the tremor underneath. He moved like a shadow, reaching the door just as Marcus Hartley's voice cut through. You think you can help her? You think some pictures in a file are going to save her from me? Adrian didn't knock. He simply turned the handle. These old buildings had locks he could pick in his sleep, and stepped inside. The scene that greeted him made something dark and primal unfurl in his chest. Sarah Mitchell stood in front of a young blonde woman who was huddled on an exam table, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. Sarah's brown hair was coming loose from its professional bun, Her white coat was askew, and she held a phone in one hand like a weapon. But it was her eyes that caught Adrian, warm brown eyes that blazed with defiance even as her free hand shook. Marcus Hartley had his back to the door, his fist raised. "That's close enough," Adrian said quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus spun around, his face flushed with anger that drained away the moment he registered who stood in the doorway. "Mr. Volkov." Marcus's voice cracked on the name. "This is a private matter. Family business." Adrian let his gaze drift past Marcus to the woman on the exam table. She was crying silently, fresh blood trickling from her split lip. Then he looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw something he recognized. The kind of courage that came from choosing to stand up even when every survival instinct screamed to run. "In my building," Adrian said, each word precisely measured. "Nothing is private. Dr. Mitchell pays rent. That makes her business my business." He took one step forward, just one. But Marcus stumbled backward like he'd been shoved. "And you're trespassing! My wife is here. I have every right." "Your wife?" Adrian glanced at Emma again, taking in the bruises, the terror. "She's a patient receiving medical care. You have no rights here." He pulled his phone from his pocket with his left hand, keeping his right free. In his world, you never knew when you'd need to reach for the gun at your hip. "You have 2 choices, Marcus. You can leave now, quietly, or I can have my associates escort you out, and we both know that wouldn't be quiet at all." The threat hung in the air, unspoken, but perfectly clear. Everyone in Chicago knew what Adrian Volkov's associates were capable of. The Volkov family had controlled the city's underground for 3 generations through a combination of legitimate business fronts and activities the authorities could never quite prove. Marcus's jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. For a moment, Adrian thought he might be stupid enough to try something. Almost hoped he would. But then Marcus's gaze slid to Sarah, pure venom in his eyes. "This isn't over." "Actually," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a register that made grown men confess their sins, "it is. If you come near this building again, if you come near Dr. Mitchell or your wife again, there won't be a conversation. There will just be consequences. Do we understand each other?" Marcus went pale. He nodded once, jerky and furious, and then fled like the coward he was. The silence he left behind felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. Sarah's phone clattered to the counter as her hands started shaking in earnest. The adrenaline was wearing off, Adrian realized, and shock was setting in. He'd seen it 100 times. "Emma," Sarah said, her voice rough, "we need to get you somewhere safe. I have a friend who runs a shelter." "No." Emma shook her head violently, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "No shelters. He'll find me. He always finds me." "She's right," Adrian said, drawing both women's attention. "Marcus Hartley has money and connections. A public shelter would be the first place he'd look." He studied Emma for a moment, calculating. "I have a property on the north side. Private, secure. You can stay there as long as you need." Sarah stepped forward, positioning herself between Adrian and her patient in a gesture that would have been laughable if it wasn't so admirable. She barely came up to his shoulder, and he could break her without effort. But she stared up at him with those warm brown eyes gone cold with suspicion. "Why would you help us?" "Why wouldn't I?" "Because men like you don't do favors without expecting something in return." Adrian felt his lips curve into something that wasn't quite a smile. Interesting. Most people couldn't meet his eyes, let alone challenge him. "Men like me? You're Adrian Volkov." She said his name like an accusation. "I read the news. I know who you are, what you are." "Then you know I keep my word." He pulled a card from his inner pocket, held it out. When she didn't take it, he set it on the counter. "The address is on the back. Security code is 0417. There's food, clean clothes, medical supplies. Emma will be safe there while we figure out a more permanent solution." "We?" Sarah crossed her arms. "There's no we. I'm her doctor. I'll handle this. Like you were handling it when Marcus was about to put his fist through your face. Her cheeks flushed, anger sparking in her eyes, and Adrian felt that dark thing in his chest unfurl a little more. She was magnificent like this, all righteous fury and protective instinct. I had it under control. With your phone? He raised an eyebrow. Were you going to call the police? The same police department that has 3 of Marcus Hartley's fraternity brothers on the force? The same police who've filed 7 domestic disturbance reports at his address and never made a single arrest? Sarah's jaw clenched. She knew he was right. They both did. Dr. Mitchell? Emma said quietly from the exam table. Both of them turned. Please, I'll go to Mr. Volkoff's property, just for tonight. Just until we figure something else out. Sarah looked torn, her gaze moving between Emma's bruised face and Adrian's carefully neutral expression. He could see her mind working, weighing options, calculating risks. She was smart. Too smart to trust him, but also too smart to turn down the only real protection Emma had right now. Fine, she said finally, but I'm coming too. I want to make sure she's settled and that place is actually what you say it is. Adrian inclined his head. Nikolai will drive you both. I have some business to attend to first. What kind of business? The kind that ensures Marcus Hartley understands exactly how serious I was about consequences. Something flickered in Sarah's eyes. Not quite approval, but not condemnation either. Understanding, maybe? A recognition that in this world, sometimes safety required the threat of violence. Don't hurt him, she said quietly. I won't be responsible for that. I'm not asking you to be responsible for anything, Dr. Mitchell. Adrian moved toward the door, paused. But Marcus made a choice when he raised his hand to his wife. He made another choice when he came to your office and threatened you both. All I'm doing is explaining the natural consequences of those choices. He left before she could argue, pulling out his phone as he walked down the hallway. Nikolai answered on the first ring. Boss? Dr. Mitchell and Emma Hartley are going to the Riverside property. I want 2 guards posted outside, 2 more on the perimeter. Nobody gets within 100 yards without my authorization. Understood. What about Marcus Hartley? Adrian stepped into the elevator, watched the doors close. His reflection stared back at him from the polished metal, cold, controlled, the face he showed the world. Find him, have a conversation, make it memorable. How memorable? He should wake up in a hospital, nothing permanent, but enough that he'll think twice before raising his hand to anyone again. And Nikolai, make sure it's clear this is just a warning. The next time won't be. Consider it done. Adrian ended the call and allowed himself a moment to feel the rage he'd been suppressing since he'd walked into that exam room. Men who hurt women were a particular breed of coward he had no patience for. In his world, there were rules, codes. You didn't touch civilians unless they made themselves targets. You didn't hurt women or children. You handled your business with honor, or you didn't handle it at all. Marcus Hartley had violated every rule that mattered. The drive to Adrian's office took 15 minutes. He spent them thinking about Sarah Mitchell, the way she'd stood her ground despite her fear, the protective fury in her eyes when she'd positioned herself in front of her patient, the intelligence sharp enough to know exactly who and what he was. She was dangerous. Not in the way his enemies were dangerous, with guns and ambitions and vendettas, but dangerous to the careful control he maintained over every aspect of his life. Because when he'd seen her shaking but defiant, something had shifted in his chest. Something that felt uncomfortably like the beginnings of obsession. Adrian didn't do obsession. He did careful planning and strategic thinking and relationships that served a purpose. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Sarah Mitchell's face, heard her voice challenging him, felt the pull of her courage like gravity. This was going to be a problem. By the time Nikolai texted to confirm that Sarah and Emma were safely at the Riverside property, Adrian had already pulled Marcus Hartley's complete financial history. 3 trust funds, 7 bank accounts, 5 credit cards maxed out on gambling debts Marcus thought he'd hidden from his family. Interesting. The Hartley family patriarch, William Hartley, was old money and old connections. Untouchable through conventional means. But Marcus was the weak link, spoiled, entitled, living off family money, while making enemies faster than he made friends. Adrian made 3 phone calls. The first was to a judge who owed him a favor. "I need a restraining order, temporary then permanent, Marcus Hartley. Restrained from approaching Emma Hartley, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, or the medical building on 5th and Main." The second call was to his lawyer. "Draft divorce papers for Emma Hartley. Grounds are abuse, documented by medical photographs. I want her protected. No alimony payments to Marcus. Full separation of assets. Everything she brought to the marriage returned." The third call was to a business associate who ran a private investigation firm. "Marcus Hartley, I want everything. Every dirty secret, every debt, every skeleton. If he jaywalked in 3rd grade, I want to know about it." Then Adrian sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers, thinking. Marcus wouldn't let this go easily. Men like him never did. They viewed their wives as property, extensions of their own ego. Emma leaving would be a blow to his pride, and pride made men stupid, dangerous, which meant Sarah was now in danger too. The thought made something cold and lethal settle in Adrian's gut. He'd meant what he said. In his building, under his protection, she was his responsibility. But it was more than that now. The moment she'd stood between Emma and Marcus, she'd proven herself brave. The moment she'd challenged Adrian himself, she'd proven herself fearless. And Adrian Volkov protected what was his. His phone buzzed. A text from Nikolai. Package delivered. He'll remember. Good. Another text, this one from an unknown number. "This is Dr. Mitchell. Emma is settled. Your property is secure. Thank you for your help. We'll be gone in the morning." Adrian read the message 3 times, analyzing the carefully professional tone. The way she'd said, "we'll be gone," like she couldn't wait to be out from under his roof. He typed back, "You'll stay as long as necessary. Marcus won't give up this easily." The response came faster this time. "That's not your problem." "You became my problem when you walked into my building, Dr. Mitchell. Everything in it is mine to protect." A long pause. Then, "I'm not a possession." Adrian smiled, a real smile this time, the kind that rarely touched his face. "No, you're much more interesting than that." No response. He waited 5 minutes, then 10, but his phone stayed silent. Finally, he pocketed it and returned to his work, though his concentration was shot. Sarah Mitchell had gotten under his skin in less than an hour. He should have found it irritating. Instead, he found it exhilarating. The next morning, Adrian arrived at the Riverside property at 7 a.m. with coffee and breakfast from Sarah's favorite cafe. He knew it was her favorite because he'd made it his business to know everything about her over the past 3 months. Where she bought coffee, where she grocery shopped, that she volunteered at a free clinic every Saturday, that she'd moved to Chicago from a small town in Indiana 6 years ago and built her practice from nothing. He knew she was 32, unmarried, no serious relationships in the past 2 years. He knew her parents were dead, and she had a sister in California she called every Sunday. He knew she was brilliant and compassionate, and the kind of stubborn that meant she'd fight for her patients even when it put her in danger. What he didn't know was how to stop thinking about her. The guard at the door, Victor, one of his most trusted men, straightened when Adrian approached. "Boss, they're both still sleeping." Dr. Mitchell took the main bedroom, insisted Mrs. Hartley needed it more, ended up on the couch. Of course she did. Adrian let himself in quietly, moving through the modern open-concept space with practiced silence. The property was one of his favorites, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, high-end security disguised as upscale amenities, and enough distance from neighbors that privacy was guaranteed. Sarah was curled up on the leather couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her dark hair spilled across a throw pillow. She'd kicked off her shoes but otherwise looked like she'd simply collapsed from exhaustion. There were shadows under her eyes, and even in sleep her expression held a small line of worry between her brows. Adrian set the coffee and food on the kitchen counter and stood there, watching her sleep, feeling like a stalker and not caring enough to stop. She was beautiful in an understated way. Not the flashy beauty that turned heads in clubs, but the kind that revealed itself slowly. Strong features, an expressive mouth, hands that looked capable and gentle at the same time. The kind of beautiful that lasted, that deepened with age and character. He was so absorbed in studying her that he didn't notice when her eyes opened. "How long have you been standing there watching me sleep?" Her voice was rough with sleep and accusation. "Not long." Adrian moved to the kitchen, poured coffee into 2 mugs with the ease of someone comfortable in any space he occupied. "Cream and 2 sugars, correct?" Sarah sat up slowly, pushing her hair back from her face. "How do you know how I take my coffee?" "I make it my business to know things." He brought the mug to her, watched her hands wrap around it like she needed the warmth. "How's Emma?" "Sleeping. Finally." Sarah took a sip, closed her eyes briefly in appreciation. "She woke up twice during the night crying. I gave her something for the pain, but the emotional trauma." She trailed off, opened her eyes, and fixed him with a hard stare. "What did you do to Marcus?" "I had a conversation with him about appropriate behavior. That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting." Adrian sat down in the chair across from her, maintaining careful distance. "Marcus Hartley is in the hospital with 3 broken ribs, a fractured jaw, and a concussion. He's telling the police he was mugged. He won't be bothering Emma or you again." Sarah's face went pale. "You said you wouldn't hurt him." "No, you said not to hurt him, and I said I wasn't asking you to be responsible. There's a difference." Adrian kept his voice calm, rational. "He beat his wife. He threatened you. He made choices that had consequences. That's not on you, doctor. That's on him." "I can't." She set down the coffee with shaking hands. "I can't be part of this. Violence as a solution to violence? That's not who I am. I know who you are." Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, holding her gaze. "You're a woman who treats patients who can't pay, who works late because you can't turn anyone away, who stands between abusers and victims even when you're terrified. I know exactly who you are, Sarah Mitchell." The use of her first name made her flinch. "You don't know anything about me. I know you moved to Chicago with $8,000 in savings and student loans that would crush most people. I know you could work at any prestigious hospital in the city, but choose to run a small practice because it lets you actually help people. I know your favorite coffee is a vanilla latte, and you volunteer at St. Mary's Clinic every Saturday from 9 to 2. He watched her face go from pale to flushed. "I know that 3 months ago, when you moved into my building, you were the first person who looked me in the eye and smiled like I was just a man, not a monster." Sarah stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "This is insane. You've been watching me, investigating me, protecting you." Adrian rose slowly, keeping his movements controlled so he wouldn't spook her. "Men in my position have enemies, Dr. Mitchell. I protect what's mine. And whether you want to admit it or not, you became mine the moment you signed that lease. I'm not yours. I'm not anyone's. Then why haven't you left?" He moved closer, watching her pulse jump at her throat. "Why did you stay here last night when you could have taken Emma to a shelter? Why did you text me instead of the police?" "Because," she stopped, seemed to be searching for words. "Because I knew you could actually protect her. Because the system fails women like Emma every day, and I needed something more than empty promises and paperwork." "Exactly." Adrian stopped an arm's length away, close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. "You needed someone who operates outside the system. Someone who doesn't follow rules that were designed to let men like Marcus thrive. You needed me. That doesn't mean I belong to you." "No," he agreed quietly. "It means I belong to you." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Sarah's eyes widened, her lips parting in surprise. "What?" Adrian reached up slowly, giving her time to move away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. She trembled, but didn't retreat. The moment I saw you on those security cameras, standing up to Marcus despite your fear, I knew. The moment I walked into that exam room and saw you protecting Emma like a lioness, protecting her cub, I knew. You got into my head, Sarah. Into my chest. And I don't let anyone in. This is crazy. But her voice was whisper soft, and she swayed toward him like a flower toward sunlight. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're brave and brilliant and too stubborn for your own good. I know you see people, really see them, not just what you can get from them. I know that when you smile at the security guards and ask about their families, you actually listen to the answers. His thumb traced her cheekbone, feather light. I know you're everything I never let myself want, because wanting anything is weakness in my world. Then don't want me. Sarah's hand came up, wrapped around his wrist, but she didn't push him away. I can't be part of your world, Adrian. I save lives. I can't be connected to whatever it is you do. What I do is protect my family, my business, and now you. Everything else is just survival in a world where showing weakness gets you killed. He turned his hand in her grip, threaded their fingers together. I won't apologize for that. I won't apologize for making sure Marcus understands he can never touch Emma or you again. And I won't apologize for wanting you so badly I can barely think straight. Sarah was trembling now, her breath coming faster. This is happening too fast. 24 hours ago I didn't even know you existed. 24 hours ago I was half convinced you were a hallucination I'd created from watching too much security footage. Adrian smiled, the expression foreign on his usually stern face. But you're real, and you're here, and I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I'm more than the monster you think I am. I don't think you're a monster. The admission seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised him. I think you're dangerous. I think you live in a world I don't understand. But when you walked into that exam room last night, the first thing I felt was relief. Safe. You made me feel safe, and I haven't felt that in a very long time. Then trust that feeling. He brought their joined hands to his chest, let her feel his heartbeat. Trust me to keep you safe. Keep Emma safe. Let me do what I'm good at. And what am I supposed to do? Just accept that you've decided I'm yours? No. Adrian's smile widened. You're supposed to argue with me, challenge me, drive me absolutely insane with your stubborn refusal to back down from anything. You're supposed to be exactly who you are while I do everything in my power to convince you that being mine isn't a cage, it's a partnership. Before Sarah could respond, a door opened down the hall. Emma emerged, wearing borrowed clothes that were too big, her face a collage of purple and yellow bruises in the morning light. She froze when she saw them standing so close together. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting. Sarah pulled away from Adrian, creating professional distance even as her hand lingered in his for a heartbeat longer than necessary. How are you feeling? Sore, scared. Emma wrapped her arms around herself. Is it true? Did Marcus end up in the hospital? Adrian answered before Sarah could. Yes. He won't be bothering you again. You don't know that. You don't know him like I do. He'll... Emma. Adrian's voice gentled in a way few people ever heard. I've dealt with men like Marcus my entire life. Men who think power comes from making others afraid. He's a coward who picks on people he thinks can't fight back. Now he knows you can. That you have people who will fight for you. That changes everything. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. Because Dr. Mitchell cares about you. That's enough. Sarah made a soft sound, something between a laugh and a sob. When Adrian glanced at her, her eyes were suspiciously bright. I need to examine Emma's injuries in proper light, Sarah said, her doctor voice firmly in place. Make sure nothing was missed last night. The master bathroom has excellent lighting. Take your time. Adrian moved toward the door, paused. I'm having breakfast delivered in an hour. Is there anything either of you don't eat? We can't stay here, Sarah protested. Emma needs somewhere safe while we sort out the legal situation. Divorce papers are being drafted. A restraining order will be filed today. But that takes time, and in the meantime, she's vulnerable. Adrian looked at Emma. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. No expectations, no obligations, just safety. Emma looked at Sarah, who looked at Adrian with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you, Emma whispered finally. I don't know how to repay. You don't repay kindness, Adrian interrupted gently. You pass it forward when you're able. That's how it works. He left before the emotion in the room could overwhelm his carefully maintained control. Before he did something stupid like pull Sarah into his arms and kiss her until she stopped thinking about all the reasons this was a bad idea. Outside, Nikolai waited by the car, tablet in hand. Marcus Hartley made bail 2 hours ago. His father paid it. Expected. Adrian climbed into the back seat. What about the restraining order? Judge says he'll have it ready by noon. The photographs Dr. Mitchell took are compelling evidence. Good. And the investigation? Nikolai's expression darkened. You're going to want to see this. He handed over the tablet. Adrian scrolled through the report, his jaw tightening with each revelation. Marcus Hartley wasn't just an abuser. He was drowning in debt. Gambling debts to some very dangerous people. People who made Adrian's organization look like Sunday school. He owes the Kozlov family $300,000, Adrian said flatly, due in 2 weeks. Word is, if he doesn't pay, they're coming for collateral. His wife was the collateral. Ice flooded Adrian's veins. The Kozlov family were Russian mobsters who made their money through human trafficking, drugs, and worse. They had no honor, no code, no lines they wouldn't cross. He was going to sell Emma to cover his debts. That's my read on the situation, yes. Adrian's hands clenched around the tablet hard enough to make the screen crack. Get me a meeting with Dmitry Kozlov, today. I'll pay Marcus's debt in exchange for them backing off permanently. Boss, the Kozlovs aren't reasonable. I'm not asking them to be reasonable. I'm telling them that Emma Hartley is under my protection, and anyone who touches her touches me. Dmitry is smart enough to know he doesn't want that war. Nikolai nodded slowly. I'll set it up. What about Marcus? Marcus is about to discover that being beaten up was the gentle warning. If he doesn't sign those divorce papers immediately and disappear from Chicago, I'll hand him over to Dmitry personally. Let him deal with his own debts. Understood. And Dr. Mitchell? Adrian looked out the window toward the property, where Sarah was no doubt examining Emma, cataloging injuries, being the healer she was born to be. Dr. Mitchell is mine to protect. Make sure the entire organization knows it. Anyone who threatens her answers to me directly. The meeting with Dmitry Kozlov took place in a warehouse on the south side, the kind of location that screamed illegal activity happening here. Adrian arrived with Nikolai and 2 other guards, while Dmitry brought half an army. Dmitry himself was a bull of a man, 6'5", covered in prison tattoos, with dead eyes that had seen too much darkness to ever find light again. He smiled when Adrian walked in, showing gold teeth. Adrian Volkov, to what do I owe this honor? Marcus Hartley owes you money. 300,000, yes, plus interest, plus fees for making me wait. Dmitry's smile widened. But I'm a patient man. His wife is very beautiful. She'll earn it back in a year, maybe 2. Adrian felt the rage trying to claw its way up his throat and pushed it down with iron control. Marcus's wife is under my protection. You touch her, you touch me. We clear? Dmitry's smile faded. The Volkov family has no claim on her. I'm making a claim now. I'll pay Marcus's debt, 300,000 plus 50, for the inconvenience of this meeting. In exchange, you forget Emma Hartley exists. And if I say no? Then you and I have a problem, Dmitry. The kind of problem that gets messy and expensive for both of us. The kind that makes our mutual business associates very nervous. Adrian let the threat hang in the air. Or you can take the money, walk away clean, and we go back to our peaceful coexistence. Your choice." Dmitri studied him for a long moment. "This woman must be very special for you to pay another man's debts." "She's under my protection. That's all you need to know." "Not the wife, the doctor." Dimitri's eyes gleamed with malicious amusement. "I've heard rumors. The beautiful Dr. Mitchell who treats anyone who walks through her door. Some say she treated one of my men last month, didn't ask questions when he came in with a bullet wound." Adrian's blood went cold. "Your point?" "My point is, you're not doing this for Marcus Hartley's wife. You're doing it for the doctor who's protecting her. Which means Dr. Mitchell is important to you. Very important. Take the money or don't, Dmitri. But if you even think about using Sarah Mitchell to get to me, I will burn your entire operation to the ground and salt the earth where it stood. Do we understand each other?" The warehouse went silent. Dimitri's men shifted nervously. Everyone knew Adrian Volkov didn't make empty threats. Finally, Dmitri laughed, a booming sound that echoed off the metal walls. "I like you, Adrian. You have balls. 350,000, and Emma Hartley is forgotten. You have my word." "Your word means nothing. I want it in writing, signed in blood if necessary, that the Kozlov family has no claim on Emma Hartley, or anyone associated with her. Done." Dmitri extended his hand. "But Adrian, when the doctor breaks your heart, and she will, women like that always do, don't come crying to me." Adrian shook his hand, feeling like he was making a deal with the devil. Maybe he was, but if it kept Sarah and Emma safe, he'd shake hands with hell itself. The money transferred within the hour. The contract was signed. Adrian had Nikolai deliver a copy to his lawyers with instructions to keep it somewhere very safe. Then he went back to the Riverside property. Sarah was in the kitchen, cooking something that smelled amazing. She'd changed clothes, borrowed something from the closet he kept stocked for emergencies, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked domestic and beautiful, and completely wrong for him in every way that mattered. He wanted her anyway. "You're back," she said without turning around. "Emma's sleeping again. The pain medication knocked her out." "Good. She needs rest." Adrian moved to the counter, watching Sarah's efficient movements as she chopped vegetables. "I paid Marcus's gambling debts today." That made her pause. "What?" "He owed money to some very bad people. People who were planning to take Emma as collateral. I paid his debts and made sure they understood she's under my protection." Sarah set down the knife carefully, turned to face him. "How much?" $350,000. "Adrian," her voice cracked. "That's insane. You can't just—" "I can. I did. It's done." He moved closer, watched her process the information. "Emma is safe now. Marcus will sign the divorce papers, or I'll make his life very difficult. The restraining order is already filed. She can rebuild her life without looking over her shoulder. Because of you. Because you cared enough to take photographs, to offer her safety, to stand up to Marcus even when you were terrified. I just removed the obstacles." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll have dinner with me. Tonight. Just the two of us." "Adrian. One dinner, Sarah. Let me take you somewhere nice. Somewhere we can talk without hospitals and violence and unconscious patients. Let me show you I'm more than the man who breaks bones and pays off mobsters." She studied his face for a long moment, and he let her look. Let her see past the cold exterior to the man underneath who was terrified she'd say no. "One dinner," she agreed finally. "But I'm not promising anything beyond that. I'm not asking for promises. Just a chance." That night, Adrian took Sarah to the best restaurant in Chicago, the kind of place where reservations took months and the waitstaff treated every guest like royalty. He'd bought out the entire restaurant, giving them privacy and ensuring no one would overhear their conversation. Sarah wore a dress she'd insisted on going home to get. Simple, black, elegant, professional. She looked beautiful and nervous and determined all at once. "You bought out the whole restaurant. she said as they were seated at a table overlooking the city lights. I wanted privacy. This is excessive. I'm an excessive man when it comes to things I care about. Adrian signaled the waiter, ordered wine he knew she'd like because he'd made it his business to know. Tell me about yourself, Sarah Mitchell. The real story, not the one I could piece together from investigation reports. She laughed, a genuine sound that made his chest warm. That's a terrible pickup line. I've never needed pickup lines before. Let me guess, you just look at women and they fall at your feet? Usually I don't look at women at all. I don't have time for distractions. He leaned forward. And then you moved into my building and became the most distracting thing in my entire life. Sarah blushed, took a sip of wine to cover it. I grew up in a small town in Indiana. My parents died in a car accident when I was 23, right before I started medical school. My sister helped me pay for it. She married rich, though she'd kill me for saying it like that. I moved to Chicago because I wanted to make a difference, help people who couldn't help themselves. Why Chicago specifically? Because it's big enough to get lost in, but small enough to matter. Because it needed doctors willing to work in underserved communities. Because I wanted to prove I could make it somewhere that didn't know my family or my history. She met his eyes. Why did you take over your family business instead of doing something legitimate? Who says it's not legitimate? At her look, he smiled. My father built an empire on both sides of the law. When he died, I inherited an organization that provided for hundreds of families, created jobs, protected neighborhoods the police had abandoned. Could I have walked away? Started fresh? Maybe, but that would have meant abandoning everyone who depended on us. I'm many things, Sarah, but I'm not a man who abandons his responsibilities. Even if those responsibilities involve violence? Especially then. In my world, strength is the only language some people understand. You use it to protect those who can't protect themselves, to maintain order, to ensure the people who work for you can feed their families without fear. He reached across the table, took her hand. I know that's not your world. I know you save lives while I sometimes have to take them, but we're not as different as you think. How do you figure that? You stand between patience and death. I stand between my people and chaos. We both sacrifice pieces of ourselves to protect others. We both operate in worlds where one mistake can mean catastrophe. We both care too much to walk away when things get hard. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her hand warm in his. You're very good at this. At what? Making darkness sound like light. Making violence sound noble. I'm not trying to make it sound like anything. I'm showing you the truth. My world is dark, Sarah. I won't lie about that. But there's light, too. Families protected, neighborhoods safe, justice served when the system fails. I can give you that light without asking you to live in my darkness. How? By being your shield. By handling the ugly parts so you never have to. By making sure that when you go to sleep at night, you never have to wonder if you're safe, if Emma's safe, if anyone who matters to you is at risk. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Let me be the monster so you can stay the angel. I'm not an angel. To me you are. To Emma you are. To every patient who walks through your door and gets treated with dignity and compassion, you're an angel. Adrian brought her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Let me worship you the way you deserve. Sarah's breath caught. You're dangerous. Only to people who threaten what's mine. I'm not yours. Not yet. But you will be. He said it with absolute certainty, watching her pupils dilate. You'll fight it because you're stubborn and smart, and you know getting involved with me is complicated, but eventually you'll realize that complicated doesn't mean wrong, that protection doesn't mean possession. That being mine means being cherished, protected, loved with an intensity most people never experience. Loved. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I'm falling in love with you, Sarah Mitchell. Have been since the day you moved into my building. Maybe before, if I'm honest. Maybe from the moment I saw your rental application and your photo and something in my chest said, her. Adrian stood, moved to her side of the table, knelt beside her chair in a gesture that made her gasp. I know it's fast. I know it's insane. I know a smart woman like you should run screaming, but I'm asking you to be brave one more time. Be brave enough to let someone protect you for once. Be brave enough to accept that you deserve to be cherished. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. What if I break your heart? Then I'll die a happy man knowing I got to love you while I could. Sarah cupped his face in her hands, her touch gentle and reverent. You're absolutely insane. Probably. Is that a yes? It's a I want to try. It's a this terrifies me but I can't walk away. It's a if you hurt me, I'll make you regret it. Adrian smiled, turned his head to kiss her palm. I can work with that. He stood, pulling her up with him, and kissed her for the first time. Gentle at first, testing, learning the shape of her mouth. Then deeper when she made a soft sound and pressed closer, her hands fisting in his suit jacket. She tasted like wine and hope, and everything he'd never let himself want. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah laughed shakily. We're doing this? Really doing this? Unless you want to stop. I should want to stop. This is crazy and fast and... Perfect, Adrian finished. It's perfect. You're perfect. And I'm going to spend every day proving I deserve you. 3 months later, Emma's divorce was finalized. She'd started therapy, enrolled in college courses, and moved into her own apartment, still in one of Adrian's buildings, still under his protection, but independent and healing. She'd thanked Sarah with tears in her eyes, and Sarah had just hugged her and told her to pay it forward. Marcus had disappeared from Chicago entirely. Rumor said he'd moved to Florida, got a job selling insurance, and married someone who kept him on a very short leash. Adrian had made sure every organization in the city knew Marcus was unwelcome. And the Hartley family patriarch had quietly disowned him. The restraining order remained in place, just in case. Sarah had moved into the Riverside property with Adrian 6 weeks into their relationship, after he'd proposed, and she'd said yes with laughter and tears and a kiss that had nearly brought him to his knees. She kept her practice, still treated patients who couldn't pay, still volunteered at St. Mary's every Saturday. But now she came home to Adrian, to safety and love and the kind of partnership she'd never thought she could have. You know this is insane, she said one evening as they sat on the balcony watching the sunset over the river. She wore his ring on her finger, a simple platinum band with a diamond that caught the light. 6 months ago, I didn't even know you existed. Now I'm planning a wedding. Small wedding, Adrian reminded her, pressing a kiss to her temple. Just family and close friends. No big spectacle. Your idea of small is 100 people. Compromise, 75. Sarah laughed, the sound still surprising him with its ability to warm his chest. How did this happen? You took photographs of a patient's injuries. I walked into an exam room and saw a woman brave enough to stand against the world. Adrian pulled her closer. The rest was inevitable. Nothing is inevitable. This was. You were. He turned her face to his, studied the features he'd memorized, the eyes that saw past his darkness to the man underneath. I love you, Dr. Sarah Volkoff-to-be. I love you too, Adrian Volkoff. She kissed him softly. My dangerous, overprotective, excessive man who bought out an entire restaurant for our first date. And paid off mob debts for your patient. And threatened police officers. And proposed after 6 weeks. And somehow convinced me that all of that was romantic instead of terrifying. Adrian smiled against her lips. I'm very persuasive. You're very lucky I'm insane enough to love you anyway. No, he said seriously, pulling back to meet her eyes. I'm lucky you're brave enough to let me love you, to trust me with your heart, even though every logical part of your brain said to run. That's not insane, Sarah. That's courage. That's faith. That's everything I never thought I'd deserve. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, happy ones this time. we're going to be okay, aren't we? Better than okay. We're going to be extraordinary. Adrian stood, pulled her up with him. Dance with me? There's no music. There's always music when I'm with you. So they danced on the balcony as the sun set over Chicago. A doctor and a mobster, an angel and a monster. Two people who should never have worked but fit together like they'd been made for each other. And in Adrian's world, where he controlled everything, where he planned every move and calculated every risk, Sarah Mitchell was the one thing he'd never seen coming. She was his greatest vulnerability, his most precious treasure, his heart walking around outside his body, and he'd burn the whole city down before he let anything happen to her. But Sarah didn't need him to burn cities. She just needed him to love her, protect her, stand beside her as she saved the world one patient at a time. So that's exactly what he did. Because in the end, the photographs that Dr. Sarah Mitchell took weren't just evidence of abuse. They were the beginning of something neither she nor Adrian could have predicted. They were the spark that brought together two people from different worlds. Two souls that recognized each other despite all logic and reason. They were proof that sometimes the most unexpected moments change everything. And sometimes the man who walks through your door in your darkest hour isn't a monster at all. He's just been waiting his whole life to find someone worth being human for.